Hello, Daniel. Today's math lesson is about sketching fractions. And we're going to be working with worksheet 28 today. Right, and so with sketching fractions, it says here that we're going to learn to sketch and shade fractions freehand and then define some equivalent fractions. So how do we go about sketching fractions? Well, the first thing we could do is just freehand a rectangle, right? So just on your paper, you could draw a decent sized rectangle like this as best you can. And then if we wanted to divide this rectangle into fourths, what we could do, and again, we're just sketching, right? So it doesn't have to be exact. It needs to represent what we're trying to do. But we would find what we think is about the halfway point of the rectangle that we just drew, and we'd make a mark. Okay, so that mark right there, there's about half of the rectangle to the left of that mark, half of the rectangle to the right. Now, if we're trying to divide the rectangle into fourths, we would first make our mark that shows the halfway point in the rectangle, and then each half, the left half and the right half, we could cut that in half. So we would first divide the rectangle into halves, and then divide the halves into half again. And so I could give myself a little tick mark roughly at the halfway point on each side. Then for each of those tick marks that I've made, I can go ahead and draw the line all the way through. And now I have a rectangle that's divided into fourths. Now, again, this would be, we're not worried about being exact, right? So when we're told to sketch something, we just want to, be as close as we can sketching, so that it looks like each of our fourths here is the same side. Now, if we're trying to find 1/4, okay, so then here on this last picture, we have shaded in 1/4 of the rectangle. So not only do we know the 1/4, but we also know how much is needed to make the whole 1, 2, 3, 3/4. Right? And so we can see that easily from our sketching. Okay. By the way, these marks right here that are sketched in, these slanted marks, we call that cross-hatching. And so notice that the cross-hatching marks are parallel to one another, and they're like 45 degrees at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so it's cross-hatching. Now, so when I cross-hatch, right, probably easiest to draw it up this way. I mean, I guess there's no reason you can't if you wanted to draw it down this way. Now, one thing you might want to do if you want to distinguish between, like if I wanted to shade this second one, but I wanted to see that I'd shaded two and not lose the distinction between the two, I could, this one, go ahead and cross-hatch this way. Now I'm drawing from the upper to the lower, right? But now they stand out as two rectangles shaded. So you don't have to go from the lower left to the upper right. You could go from the upper left to the lower right, like I did, right, this way, if you wanted to. And I should have drawn my line better there, but you get the idea. Okay, now, so there we found a way to sketch. We sketch our rectangle. We can find the halfway mark. And this would be when we're dealing with finding 1/2, 1/4. I mean, if we need to find 1/8, I think we could go ahead, if we just, each of these, if we divided them in half, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we'd find eighths. If we need to find 16ths, each of those we could divide into half. Right, so you notice that each time you divide each part into halves, you are doubling the number of parts you have. So here we have halves, then we doubled it by dividing each half into half. We have fourths. Divide each fourth into half, eighths, and so on. Okay? Well, we don't always want to find fourths or halves. What if we want to find thirds? Okay. Well, let's look at this here. To estimate 1/3, again, we can sketch our rectangle. And then let's notice what it says here. To estimate 1/3, B needs to be twice A. So when I'm going to make my hatch mark, right, when I'm doing half, I kind of find a spot where it looks like I've got half the rectangle on the left and half the rectangle on the right. Okay, and so it might be there. In doing thirds, I want to find the spot where the part of the rectangle that's to the right of my hash mark looks twice as big as the part that's to the left. And so you'll notice that they chose to put their hatch mark here. If I look at it, right, it looks like 2 of these rectangles here could fit over here, right? In other words, it looks like B, this area marked B, is twice the size of the area marked A, or twice as long, if you will. Okay? So here's 1/3. This piece over here represents 2/3, right? So if I needed to shade just 1/3, I could make this hatch mark here and then do my cross hatching, and I've shaded 1/3 of this rectangle. Right? If I needed to shade 2/3, right? Well, now that I've done this mark here, and I said, and I'm satisfied that looks like 1/3. If this is twice as long as this, right? Area B, if I cut area B in half, right? If I find the halfway point for area B, now I have 1, 2, 3. I have thirds, right? So again, how did I do that? My first mark, I found that place where it looked like to the right is twice what's to the left. And I placed my mark. Now I have 1/3 of the whole rectangle. Now, to get the other 2/3, go ahead and cut the larger area in half, and I have thirds. Okay? All right, so that's a little run through on sketching and shading fractions freehand. So on worksheet 28, you're going to be shading in some fractions, I think, and then we're shading in some rectangles to represent fractions. And then I think you're going to do some cross-hatching maybe, or some dividing of rectangles into fraction parts. Okay? So worksheet 28 is your assignment.